What if I told you the most powerful response you could ever give was none at all? That the real shift in control happens not when you argue, cry, or chase, but when you go quiet. Most people think silence means weakness. They assume it's the sound of someone who's lost, who's been broken. But what if we've had it backwards all along? What if silence is the ultimate form of power, precision, and personal growth? That's exactly what we're going to uncover today. Because the truth is, your silence isn't passive. It's active. It's doing the kind of damage their ego never prepared for. And you, whether you realize it or not, are in control. Let me ask you something. Have you ever stopped explaining yourself to someone who never really listened anyway? Have you ever pulled back your energy and watched how quickly their world began to spiral? Have you felt the eerie calm when you finally stopped justifying your worth to someone who never earned your presence in the first place? That isn't weakness, that's power. And that power doesn't just echo, it reverberates through their sense of self. This video is for the ones who've been blamed, overlooked, underestimated, and used. For the ones who kept giving, forgiving, and believing. Until one day, you didn't. There's a problem with how we've been taught to respond to disrespect, emotional manipulation, and control. We're told to speak up, to fight for closure, to prove our worth. But what if none of that works? Not because you're not enough, but because they never intended to see your value in the first place. In Stoic Relationships, the wise know when to speak, but more importantly, when not to. That moment you go silent, that's when you shift the entire dynamic. The dimensions of this issue run deep. We're not just talking about someone missing your texts. We're talking about ego starvation, identity unraveling, emotional dependence exposed. Silence becomes a mirror, and most people hate what they see. Today, I'll walk you through 6 undeniable ways your silence dismantles their illusion of control. Each one is grounded not in revenge, but in stoic clarity, dignity, and strength. These aren't petty games. This is stoicism in motion, taking back your power without saying a single word. So stick with me until the end, because in the final section, you'll discover the one shift that ensures they can never reach you the same way again. This isn't just about them, it's about you. Elevating, detaching, growing. If you're ready to stop feeding their ego and start reclaiming your energy, let's begin. The silence is speaking. The question is, are you ready to let it echo? 1. They never thought you'd walk away. They never thought you'd walk away. Not really. Maybe you said you would before, maybe you even tried, but in their mind, the story always ended the same. With you returning, with you forgiving, with you proving once again that your love outweighed your boundaries. And they counted on that. They depended on the idea that no matter how many times they disrespected your time, your emotions, or your value, you'd still be there. But now they're facing a silence they never prepared for. Not the kind of silence that plays games, but the kind that speaks volumes without making a sound. The kind that isn't temporary, because this time something changed inside you. You didn't just get tired, you evolved. You saw the cycle for what it was. And when you looked at yourself and asked, is this really the love I want? The answer became clear. This isn't about anger or revenge. This is about clarity, dignity, presence. The kind of presence that knows its worth and no longer chases people who can't recognize it. The moment you stopped showing up the way they expected, their reality began to shift. Think about it. When someone mistreats you repeatedly and sees no consequence, what message does that send? That you'll stay regardless, that your love is unconditional even when it's unreciprocated, that they don't need to change because you never leave. So when you finally did, when your silence replaced your explanations, it shook something deep inside them. They didn't just lose you. They lost control of the story. They lost the version of you that begged, explained, and tried to fix what they kept breaking. And that, for someone whose ego thrives on being needed, is devastating. In Stoic relationships, the power dynamic often hinges not on who loves more, but on who needs less. They thought you needed them. That's the illusion their ego created to maintain its grip. But the truth was, you loved deeply, not desperately. And now, with the silence hanging between you, they're beginning to realize that love doesn't always fight loudly. Sometimes love walks away quietly, and in that quiet it declares, "I choose myself." How do they cope with that? Not well, because they were never prepared to face the version of you that didn't fight for them. They expected conflict, not indifference. They were ready for anger, not peace. They anticipated tears, not silence. But your lack of reaction, that's what's echoing in their mind at 2 a.m., louder than any argument ever could. Because silence isn't absence, it's presence redefined. It's a boundary enforced without drama. And it forces them to sit in the discomfort they always managed to escape when you were the one doing the emotional work. Think of the times you reached out just to keep the peace, even when it wasn't your fault. The times you initiated conversations to fix what they broke. The times you tried to understand them more than they tried to understand themselves. All of that effort, all of that emotional generosity became their expectation. And now that you've withdrawn it, they're scrambling. Not just because you're gone, but because your silence is a mirror and what they see in it isn't flattering. The image of someone who pushed away the very person who wanted to love them with patience, consistency, and loyalty. That's not easy to sit with. And here's where the Stoic mindset reveals its quiet brilliance. Stoicism teaches that we cannot control the actions of others, only our responses. Your silence then becomes an act of control, not over them, but over yourself. It says, "I no longer allow you to dictate how I feel. I reclaim my peace." This is where your growth speaks loudest. Because in the past, maybe you would have chased closure, demanded answers, tried to force them to understand. But now you understand that some people only learn through absence, that the greatest lesson you can give someone isn't in what you say, but in what you stop saying. Your silence is the answer to every question they refuse to ask themselves. Questions like, why did they stop trying? Or why aren't they reacting? Or did I go too far? Questions that expose the cracks in their self-perception, their illusion of control, their belief that they were always in the driver's seat. But here's the truth. They were never driving. Your compassion was. Your patience. Your belief in their potential. And now, as that compassion retreats, they're left with nothing but their own reflection, and it's haunting. Because people don't just miss you when you're gone. They miss who they were when they were with you, the confidence you gave them, the attention you offered, the emotional safety you created. Without it, they're forced to confront their own emotional poverty. And no one likes realizing how little they have to give when someone who gave everything is no longer around. So they might act unbothered. They might post, laugh, move on, or pretend to. But beneath the surface, something is shifting. Their ego is shrinking. Not because you said something, but because you didn't. And in that silence, they're beginning to understand something they never saw coming, that the one who walks away isn't always the one who loses. Sometimes the one who walks away is the one who finally wins. Why? Because they chose peace over chaos, self-respect over validation, reality over illusion. And that kind of strength can't be manipulated, guilted, or gaslit. It can only be respected or regretted. And right now they're sitting in that regret, wondering how they lost someone who gave so much, so fully, so consistently. But that's not your burden anymore. Your role in their story has ended, the chapter has closed, and your silence, it's not just a period, it's the final sentence. What comes next is no longer about them, it's about you. You've stepped into a new version of yourself, one that no longer argues for your worth. one that no longer tries to convince someone to treat you with care, one that sees silence not as a void, but as a space where healing, growth, and transformation happen. This is what Stoicism looks like in action, not coldness, not detachment, but the kind of calm that comes from knowing your value doesn't decrease when someone else fails to see it. You didn't walk away because you stopped caring. You walked away because they did. And now, the silence speaks for you. It says, I care deeply, but I love myself more. That's not weakness, that's wisdom, that's freedom. And they'll feel it in every unanswered message, every unreturned call, every quiet moment where they expected you to show up. And you didn't. Because when the one who always showed up finally stops, the silence isn't just noticed. It's felt deeply, viscerally, unavoidably. And that, more than any word you could have spoken, is what starves their ego. So ask yourself, was it really about being heard? Or was it about being valued? Because in Stoic relationships, the moment you stop needing to be understood is the moment you become truly powerful. Your silence isn't empty, it's full of meaning. And now, finally, they're beginning to understand what you knew all along. You were the one who held the real power, not because you shouted, but because you finally stayed silent. 2. Their ego feeds on control, and you took that away. Control, that's the core addiction of the ego. It craves the ability to push your buttons, shape your mood, and bend your reactions to its will. And for a long time, they had that control over you. Not because you were weak, but because you were open. You were emotionally available, honest, giving. You wore your heart on your sleeve, and they read it like a script. They knew exactly what to say to make you question yourself. They knew how long to go silent to make you anxious, how cold to act to make you overthink, and how vague to be so. You chased clarity. It wasn't love. It was control disguised as connection. And the tragedy, you didn't even notice how much power you were giving away, one reaction at a time. Because that's how it works. It doesn't start with dramatic manipulation. It starts with small tests, ignoring your messages just long enough to make you insecure, making backhanded comments cloaked in humor, withholding affection when you needed it most. And every time you bent, apologized, or tried harder, they won, not in love, but in leverage. In Stoicism, one of the greatest virtues is temperance, the ability to respond with reason instead of being ruled by emotion. And when you decided to go silent, to no longer feed their ego with your attention or reactions, you reclaimed what they had been siphoning all along, your emotional autonomy. That silence, that refusal to participate in their manipulative dance, was the equivalent of dropping the rope in a game of tug-of-war. Suddenly they were pulling against nothing. Suddenly the game wasn't fun anymore because their control depended on your engagement. Without it, they're powerless. Have you ever noticed how some people are only kind when they want something from you? How their affection appears when you're pulling away? How their warmth returns the moment you start going cold? That's not connection. That's strategy. That's their ego recalibrating, trying to reel you back in so the control remains intact. And for a while, it might have worked. You might have mistaken inconsistency for confusion. You might have rationalized hot and cold behavior as a sign that they were just figuring things out. But now you see it clearly. They weren't confused. They were in control. Until you took that control back with your silence. And here's the beauty of it. They never saw it coming, because your silence isn't just empty space. It's resistance. It's refusal. It's the stoic assertion that you no longer allow a chaos into your peace. And it's devastating to their ego because they were never prepared to face you as an equal. They needed you to be predictable, emotional, dependent. They needed you to crack under pressure, to fold with guilt, to seek them out in your loneliness. Because as long as you did, they could pretend they mattered more than they did. They could believe they still held power over your heart. But now, with no message from you, no emotional breadcrumbs, no reaction to feed off, they're starving. And what happens when the ego starves? It lashes out, it spins narratives, it becomes desperate. They might try to provoke you again, maybe through jealousy, maybe through silence of their own, hoping you'll break first. But Stoicism teaches that the wise don't act from provocation. They act from principle. And your principle now is this: I no longer negotiate with emotional manipulation. I no longer respond to disrespect disguised as affection. You've become unreadable to them. And nothing scares someone who once had control more than not knowing how to get it back. They check your social media, looking for signs of weakness, of longing. They stalk mutual friends, hoping for news that you're not over them, that you're still affected. They overanalyze your silence because, to them, silence has always been a tactic, not a truth. But this time, it is the truth. You're done, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. You've realized that real love doesn't feel like control. It feels like freedom. And what they offered you wasn't love. It was the illusion of closeness with the reality of control. You've chosen to break that illusion. You've chosen peace, and that peace is now driving them insane. Why? Because their ego can't comprehend a world where you no longer orbit around them. They thought they were the sun. Now they realize you were the light. And the silence you've left in your wake, it's like darkness creeping in. They want answers, but you're not giving them any. They want closure, but you know closure is just another form of control, another way to keep the door cracked, open. And in Stoic relationships, we close doors that lead to chaos. We choose the discomfort of healing over the illusion of harmony. That choice terrifies them because now they don't know who you are anymore. You're not reacting the way you used to. You're not validating their toxic patterns. You're not chasing, you're not explaining, you're just gone. And not physically, but emotionally, energetically, spiritually, you've detached. And in that detachment, you've become someone they can't predict, someone they can't manipulate, someone they can't reach. That silence, it's impenetrable, because it comes from resolve, not resentment, from strength, not spite. And it's the most powerful message you've ever sent. The irony, they probably think they're still in control, that if they just wait long enough, if they just say the right thing, you'll come back. But Stoicism teaches that once the mind is free, it doesn't return to its captors. It remembers the weight of that prison, and it chooses liberation every time. You're free now, not because you ran, but because you stopped running in circles. You stepped off the emotional treadmill they had you on. And now they're left running laps in their own mind, trying to figure out what changed. You changed. You chose to value your energy. You chose not to invest in someone who sees love as leverage. And that shift, that's what they're feeling now. The emptiness, the silence, the absence of control. And it's not just unsettling, it's unbearable. They'll never admit it, of course. Pride won't allow it. But inside, they're crumbling. Because the power they thought they had wasn't theirs. It was borrowed, and you've taken it back, one silent day at a time. So if this is resonating with you, if you've felt that shift inside yourself, that beautiful, terrifying moment, when you realized you no longer needed to be understood to be at peace, then this is your confirmation. You're not crazy, you're not cold, you're free. And your silence, it's not just starving their ego, it's feeding your soul. If you're feeling that power now, I want you to like this video and comment #1 below to let me know this message is hitting home. And if you're ready for more insights like this, grounded in Stoicism, real emotional clarity, and the path of Stoic relationships, make sure to subscribe to the channel. This is just the beginning. You're not alone, and your silence, it's saying everything you need it to. 3. Your growth is what really haunts them. What truly haunts them isn't just your silence, it's who you've become since you went quiet. Because here's the brutal truth they never saw coming. You didn't just disappear from their life, you transformed outside of it. And transformation terrifies the ego, especially when it believed it had you figured out. When someone walks away, most people assume the version of you they left will stay frozen in time, still longing, still waiting, still emotionally available in some imaginary future where they might return and everything would pick up right where it left off. That's what they told themselves. That's what made the decision easy for them. But you broke that illusion, because instead of waiting, you grew. Instead of chasing them, you chased your healing. Instead of holding on to pain, you used it as fuel. That evolution, that's what they're truly afraid of, because now they don't recognize you, not in your confidence, not in your calm, not in the quiet power you now carry. The person you used to be would have folded under pressure, would have begged for closure, would have stayed emotionally entangled even after everything fell apart. But that version of you is gone, and the you that remains is someone they don't know how to approach, someone they can't manipulate, someone who doesn't look back. That's why they're spiraling. Because the very thing they thought they wanted, freedom from you, came with a cost they never expected. They lost access to your energy, your kindness, your loyalty, and most of all, your belief in them. And now they realize something critical. Your belief in them made them believe in themselves. Your support was their validation. Your love was their mirror. And now that the mirror is gone, they're left with a reflection they don't want to see. That's the power of growth. It's not just what you become, it's what you force others to confront. And for someone who hasn't changed, your growth is a threat. It reminds them of everything they've ignored in themselves. The emotional wounds they never healed, the patterns they never broke, the lies they kept telling themselves about who they are and what they deserve. In Stoicism, growth isn't about proving others wrong. It's about becoming so centered in your own values that external opinions no longer shape your reality. And that's what you've done. You've stopped performing for their approval. You've stopped needing their validation. You've stopped believing the narrative that your worth depends on how someone else sees you. Now you see yourself clearly. And that clarity, it's radiant, it's intimidating, it's undeniable. You walk differently now. You speak with intention. You're no longer seeking love, you're embodying it. And to someone who knew you when you doubted yourself, that change is deeply unsettling. Because it means you never needed them, not the way they thought you did. You simply chose to love them. You gave them your energy not because you were desperate, but because you were generous. And they mistook that generosity for dependence. Now they know better. Now they see the truth, and it stings. Because the version of you that accepted the bare minimum is gone. The version of you that stayed quiet to keep the peace, that over-explained, that lowered your standards just to maintain connection, that version no longer exists. And the more you grow, the more that absence expands. It becomes a gap they can't cross, a distance they can't bridge, because you're not just farther away in space, you're beyond them in spirit. They feel that every time they scroll through your photos and see the light in your eyes that wasn't there before. Every time they hear your name and realize people speak of you with admiration. Every time they remember how they used to affect you and how nothing they do now gets a response. That emotional shift, that's the growth haunting them, because it tells them the one thing their ego can't bear to hear: you're better off. Not out of spite, but out of strength. Not because they were worthless, but because you finally recognized your own worth. And that recognition has made you magnetic, not to them, but to everything you used to want from them. Love, peace, stability, validation. Now those things come from within, and it changes the way you move through the world. It changes who you allow into your life. It raises your standards, not out of arrogance, but because your healing taught you what true connection looks like. And they don't measure up anymore. They know it, they feel it, and they resent it. Because deep down, they believed they could always come back. They believed they left you waiting, not evolving. But your glow-up didn't just catch them off. God, it dismantled their entire sense of superiority. Because now, you're not just thriving, you're untouchable. And they don't know how to handle that. They might pretend not to care. They might avoid you altogether. But avoidance is just fear in disguise. They're afraid to see what you've become because it highlights what they haven't. They haven't grown. They haven't healed. They're still operating from the same egoic patterns that cost them someone like you. And now they realize that people like you don't wait forever. You don't stay stuck in grief. You rise from it. That's the lesson Stoicism whispers in every heartbreak. We suffer not from what happens to us, but from how we choose to respond. And your response, your silence, your growth, your evolution is the most stoic answer of all. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's steady, unshakable, transformational. That's what they can't stop thinking about. That's why they stalk your profile, reread your messages, replay old conversations in their mind, not because they miss the relationship, but because they miss the power they had over someone who no longer exists. They miss being important to you. They miss influencing your mood. They miss being able to shift your reality with a text. But now you've taken your reality back, and in doing so, you've left them behind, not as punishment, but as a consequence. Because growth always has a cost, and sometimes that cost is leaving behind the people who refuse to grow with you. They might try to re-enter your life. They might try to mimic your growth to win you back, but you'll see through it. You'll sense the difference between genuine evolution and performative change. And you won't settle again, because now you know what real growth feels like. It feels like peace. It feels like freedom. It feels like no longer having to prove yourself to someone who refused to see you. That's the kind of growth that haunts people, not because it's spiteful, but because it's permanent. And permanent growth means permanent separation from old habits, old pain, old versions of yourself that no longer serve you. So when they think of you now, it's not just nostalgia they feel, it's loss. Not just of a person, but of a future. They thought they could revisit whenever they wanted. That future is gone, replaced by the reality you're now living, one where you've outgrown them, their games, their control. And the echo of that truth is what follows them in every quiet moment, every failed relationship, every time they try to recreate what they had with you and come up short. That's the shadow of your growth. It lingers not to torment them, but to remind them of what happens when you take someone for granted. In Stoic relationships, there is no room for stagnation. We rise, we let go, we evolve. And as you continue evolving, remember this: their regret is not your responsibility. Their confusion is not your concern. Their inability to grow is not your limitation. You're not who you were, and that, more than anything, is what they can't escape. 4. Silence forces them to face themselves. It's easy for someone to feel secure when they're constantly surrounded by your energy, your attention, your forgiveness, your unconditional effort. As long as you were there to validate them, soothe their insecurities, and make them feel like they mattered, even when they were giving you the bare minimum, they never had to face themselves. Your presence was a distraction from their flaws. Your emotional investment was a shield from their inner emptiness. They didn't need to question whether they were lovable, capable, or worthy, because you did all the emotional labor for them. And then one day, your silence took all that away. Without the mirror you held up for them daily, they're left with a reflection they no longer recognize. That silence isn't just the absence of words, it's the presence of truth. And truth, especially when you've been running from it, is unbearable. Because now, Every moment they used to spend feeding off your energy is filled with the deafening realization that it was never about who they were. It was about how you made them feel. And without you there to do the work, their emotional scaffolding crumbles. This is the part they never anticipated. They thought walking away from you would feel like freedom. They imagined it would be a breath of fresh air. Instead, it feels like suffocation. Why? Because your presence was doing the heavy lifting in that relationship. You provided the warmth when they were cold, the grace when they were careless, the consistency when they were chaotic. You filled in their emotional blanks, bridged the distance when they pulled away, and gave them a sense of self when they couldn't find it on their own. And now they have to face the terrifying question that your silence is forcing upon them. Who am I without the person who always made me feel better about myself? It's a question they don't want to answer, so they distract themselves. They chase temporary highs, meaningless conversations, shallow validation. They post, they perform, they pretend. But the quiet always returns. The nights get longer, the memories get louder. And in that silence, your absence becomes a teacher, a merciless one, because Stoicism teaches us that nothing exposes a person faster than stillness. And your silence has created a stillness so profound that they can no longer hide from themselves. The things they buried beneath your kindness, the insecurities you tried to soothe, the pain you tried to heal, it's all rising to the surface now. And it's overwhelming, because here's the truth. Some people are emotionally dependent without even realizing it. They rely on others to regulate their self-worth. And when the source of that emotional regulation disappears, they don't know how to function. That's where they are now, spiraling. Not just because they miss you, but because they don't know who they are without the version of themselves that only existed in your presence. And that version, it was curated by you. You were the one who saw the best in them, who reminded them they were worthy, who gave them chance after chance even when they didn't deserve it, who believed in their potential more than they ever did. Without you, that illusion fades. And what's left? A raw, unfiltered look at the parts of themselves they've spent years avoiding. That's the real consequence of your silence. It forces accountability. And accountability, when you've never practiced it, feels like punishment. They have no one left to blame, no distractions to hide behind, just themselves sitting in the silence you left behind. And the longer you remain silent, the louder their inner voice becomes. It tells them the things they tried not to hear, that they were cruel when they should have been kind, that they were careless with someone who genuinely cared, that they took for granted something they couldn't replace. Those realizations, they're brutal, because they don't just highlight what they lost, they highlight who they've become. And that self-awareness, if they're not ready for it, can break a person. This is the weight of silence. This is why Stoicism values it so deeply, because silence is the only space where truth can breathe. And now that you've given them that space, there's nowhere left to run. They might try to project strength. They might pretend they're better off. But projection is a defense mechanism, not a solution. And deep down, they know the truth. You weren't just someone who loved them. You were someone who carried them. And now that you've stopped, they feel the collapse. It's emotional gravity. The higher they soared on your support, the harder they fall in your absence. And here's what's ironic. They wanted to feel powerful. They wanted to prove they didn't need you. But now that you've walked away, they realize that their power was never real. It was borrowed. And the moment you went silent, the illusion shattered. They miss you, yes, but more than that, they miss how they felt when they were with you. That version of themselves that felt worthy, admired, desired. That version only existed because of you. And now, in your silence, they're meeting the version they tried to hide. the one who's insecure, avoidant, unsure, the one you saw all along and tried to love anyway, the one who pushed you away because they couldn't accept what they didn't believe they deserved. Now they have to face that version without your help, and they're not handling it well, because personal responsibility is a mountain you can't carry someone over. They have to climb it themselves. You've already done your part. You tried. You gave. You stayed longer than you should have. And when it became clear they wouldn't meet you halfway, you chose silence, not as a punishment, but as protection. And now that silence is doing the work your words never could. It's stripping away their illusions. It's forcing them to sit with the consequences of their choices. And it's haunting them because every time they think about reaching out, something stops them. Not just pride, but fear. Fear that you won't answer. Fear that you've moved on. Fear that you've finally realized your worth. And they're right to be afraid, because you have. You've embraced stoic clarity. You've stopped reacting to chaos. You've chosen serenity over drama, growth over patterns, and your silence. It speaks volumes. It tells them, I'm no longer here to fix what you keep breaking. And that message, it echoes in their quiet moments like thunder. So if you're feeling that peace now, if you're finally realizing that not everyone deserves access to your emotional energy, honor that feeling. You've done the hard part. You've stayed silent when it would have been easier to scream. You've chosen yourself when it would have been easier to go back. And that strength, that's what Stoicism is all about. Choosing your peace, even when it's misunderstood. And if this part of your journey is resonating with you, I want you to like this video and comment number 1 below to let me know you're stepping into your power. And don't forget to subscribe, because the path of Stoic relationships is just beginning, and your silence, it's just the first chapter of your freedom. 5. Pride stops them from reaching out, but it's killing them inside. Pride is a strange force. It masquerades as strength, as power, as control, but more often than not it is fear in disguise. Pride says, I won't be the one to reach out, even when the heart is screaming to reconnect. Pride says, I'm fine, even when every sleepless night and hollow morning says otherwise. And right now, pride is the only thing standing between them and the message they want to send. Not love, not peace, not logic. Just pride, a fragile shell they're using to shield themselves from the vulnerability your silence has forced them to feel. Because the truth is, they want to reach out. They want to talk to you, explain themselves, test the waters, ask if maybe there's still a chance. But that would require them to admit they were wrong. It would require them to confront their actions, their indifference, their games. And that for someone ruled by ego is unbearable. So they wait. And the waiting becomes a weight. Every day that passes, their mind runs circles around the silence. They think of what they would say if they had the courage. They compose messages they never send. They check your profile, hoping for a signal that you miss them too. They stalk the online timestamp. They look for patterns in your posts. They ask mutual friends subtle questions just to hear your name. But they never reach out. Because pride whispers lies in their ear. If you reach out first, you lose. And that narrative becomes a prison. They sit there, trapped, reliving memories, missing you, but refusing to admit it. They convince themselves you'll fold first, that you'll get tired of being strong, that eventually you'll break the silence. But day after day, you don't. And that, more than anything, is what's breaking them. Your silence is holding up a mirror to their pride, and what they see in that reflection is not power. It's pain. Deep, gnawing, unspoken pain, because they never thought the silence would last this long. They assumed you were playing a game, that you were waiting for them to chase you, but now they're realizing it's not a game at all. It's your reality. You're done. Not pretending to be done. Not halfway out the door. You've left. Emotionally, mentally, energetically. And the longer they sit with their pride, the more it feels like self-betrayal. They want relief, but pride won't let them ask for it. They want closure, but pride won't let them seek it. They want you. But pride has convinced them that needing someone makes them weak. That's the toxic paradox they're trapped in. They think holding back is strength, but all it's doing is prolonging their suffering. And deep down, they know it. They know that if they could just put the pride down, if they could just be honest, even for a second, they might feel peace again. But honesty is a foreign language to someone who's been performing their whole life. And they've performed well, so well, in fact, that even they started believing the role they played. The one who didn't care, the one who moved on easily, the one who always had the upper hand. But pride is silent suffering. It doesn't scream, it festers. And right now, it's eating them alive. Every reminder of you, your laugh, your presence, your energy, it hits harder than they let on. They can't erase you. They can't replace you. And that realization is becoming louder than the voice of their ego, because ego only survives when there's someone to impress, someone to control, someone to fool, and you're no longer playing that part. You're gone, not to punish them, but to protect yourself. And in your silence, you've reclaimed your dignity. You've honored your boundaries. You've chosen healing over closure. And that choice, it haunts them, because it tells them everything they feared was true, that you really don't need them anymore, that you're stronger than they thought, that maybe, just maybe, they were the problem all along. That thought is the most terrifying one of all, because it demands introspection, it demands growth, it demands responsibility. But pride doesn't like responsibility. Pride wants to point fingers, to tell stories, to rewrite history in a way that makes them the victim. But silence tells the truth. It can't be twisted, it can't be manipulated. It just exists, and its existence becomes unbearable. They think about the what-ifs. What if they hadn't ghosted you? What if they had just opened up instead of shutting down? What if they had treated you like a priority instead of a placeholder? Those questions are the ones that follow them everywhere. In the quiet moments, in the half-slept nights, in the songs they used to hear with you, in the coffee shops you once sat in together, in the memories they tried to bury but now dig up daily. And all the while, pride is there, choking them, whispering, "Don't reach out, you'll look weak." But what if the weakness isn't in reaching out? What if the real weakness is being too afraid to be honest? That's the question they won't let themselves ask. Because it would mean admitting that everything they told themselves about you, about the relationship, about themselves, was wrong. And admitting that takes strength. The kind of strength Stoicism teaches us to cultivate, the courage to see ourselves clearly, the courage to own our actions, the courage to let go of ego in service of truth. But they're not there yet. They're still clinging to the image, the mask, the illusion that they're in control, that they're unaffected, that you meant less than you did. But pride is just delay. It delays growth, it delays healing, it delays love. And the longer they hold on to it, the more pain they invite in. Pain that your silence amplifies. Pain that no distraction can silence. And the most painful part, knowing that it didn't have to be this way. That if they had just been honest from the start, if they had just treated you with the care and consistency you showed them, if they had just been willing to be vulnerable, things might have ended differently. But they chose pride. And now pride is all they have. And pride doesn't text back. Pride doesn't hold you at night. Pride doesn't care if you're hurting. It just sits there, cold and bitter, and reminds them of the love they lost. And that love, it's you. You who gave freely. You who saw their potential. You who waited longer than you should have. You who finally walked away. And now, in the echo of your silence, they face the consequences of their own decisions. Not because you forced it, but because they did. Pride made them push you away, and pride now keeps them from pulling you back in. It's a tragic cycle, one they created, one they're stuck in, one that only they can break. But until they do, they'll keep suffering, quietly, secretly, behind smiles, behind posts, behind performances, but you'll see through it. Because now you've embraced the Stoic truth that peace comes not from being right, but from letting go. That love isn't proven by who reaches out, it's proven by who grows. And if they ever do reach out, if they ever find the strength to confront their pride and speak honestly, it won't be because your silence was a punishment. It'll be because your silence was a lesson in strength, in boundaries, in self-respect, and in stoicism. And by then, maybe it'll be too late. Maybe you'll be so far in your healing, so at peace with your decision, that their words will no longer hold weight, that their remorse will no longer move you. And that's okay, because your silence wasn't for them. It was for you. It was the declaration that you refused to fight for someone who wouldn't even speak truthfully. And that declaration, it changed everything. 6. The more they try to forget you, the more you linger. The more they try to forget you, the more you linger. It's one of life's cruelest paradoxes. The act of suppression strengthens memory. The harder someone tries to erase a presence, the more their mind makes it vivid. That's what's happening to them now. At first, they thought you were just a phase, a chapter they could close, a person they could eventually stop thinking about. But the deeper they push those thoughts down, the louder they echo. Every corner of their life becomes a reminder, not just of you, but of who they were when you were with them. That's the curse of a meaningful connection. It leaves traces. Traces in routines, in music, in food, in the phrases you used, in the way they look at the world. And as much as they want to delete you from memory, they can't. Because you weren't just someone they knew, you were someone who made them feel known. And that feeling, it's irreplaceable. They try distractions. Maybe it's going out more. Maybe it's dating again. Maybe it's overloading their schedule with noise so they can't hear their thoughts. But Stoicism teaches us that the more we resist an emotion, the more power it gains over us. Suppression is not resolution. Avoidance is not healing. So while they post photos and smile wide, internally, the silence you've left behind gnaws at them. It's in the pauses between conversations, the loneliness that hits even when they're surrounded by people, the sense that something is missing and nothing quite fills the space. They thought someone new could fix that if they just met someone with similar qualities, someone who was kind, who listened, who gave, they could replace what they lost. But love doesn't work that way. Human energy doesn't work that way. You weren't a checklist of attributes. They can't just find a duplicate. You were a presence, a soul, a rhythm, and rhythm is personal, deeply personal. So when they hear a certain laugh, and it's almost yours, but not quite, it breaks something inside. When they go to the place you both loved, and the air doesn't feel the same, it hits them. When they reach for their phone in a moment of vulnerability and realize there's no one else they want to text, they feel the full weight of your absence. And the mind doesn't let go easily. It replays the greatest hits of a connection that mattered, that time you comforted them when no one else noticed they were hurting. That moment you laughed until your stomachs hurt, the small rituals, the inside jokes, the comfort of knowing they were safe in your company. They remember it all, even if they pretend not to, because memory is involuntary. And the more they try to suppress you, the more their subconscious insists you were significant. That's the white bear effect in psychology. Tell the brain not to think of something, and it becomes the dominant thought. Every time they think, "I don't care anymore," your image flashes across their mind. Every time they tell themselves, "I'm over it," your voice rings in their ears. They might not show it, they might not say it, but they feel it. They feel it in the quiet hours, in the absence of your encouragement, in the emptiness of interactions that don't compare to what they had with you. Because connection, real connection, doesn't just disappear. It leaves echoes, And your echo is everywhere, not because you're haunting them, but because you were real. You were all in. And real leaves a mark. They scroll through photos and pause on your smile. They reread your messages, the ones they used to take for granted, and now they study them like scriptures, searching for meaning, trying to find the exact moment they let something so good slip away. That's the irony of your silence. It makes you louder than ever. Because when someone stops showing up physically, but remains emotionally, they become a constant in the psyche. They live in memories, in comparisons, in regrets. And that's where you are now, in the space between what they have and what they want. And no matter how hard they try to numb it, it returns over and over, stronger than before. And it's not just that they miss you, they miss the version of themselves you brought out, the softer version, the more honest one, the one that felt, understood. That version doesn't exist anymore because you were the one who nurtured it. Without your love, they're back to their old patterns, cold, closed off, unsure. And they don't like who they are without you. That's the part they don't say out loud. That's the part they hide from their friends. But inside, it eats away at them. Because you weren't just someone who loved them. You were someone who inspired them to be better. And now that you're gone, the gap between who they are and who they want to be is wider than ever. And all of this, the ache, the remembering, the inability to forget, is happening while you stay silent. That's what makes it so potent. You're not chasing, you're not correcting the record, you're not checking in, you're just gone. Not angrily, not bitterly, just gone. And that absence has become a presence, one they can't shake, one that walks beside them in their quietest hours, one that whispers, "This is what happens when you lose someone real." And no matter how far they run, that whisper follows. Because some people are unforgettable, not because of drama or pain, but because of presence, because of the way they made others feel, because of their loyalty, their depth, their grace. You are that person. And now, in your absence, they see that clearly. They're remembering you not just with longing, but with reverence, with a kind of sadness that says, "I didn't realize how rare you were." And Stoicism teaches us to be the kind of person who, when removed, leaves a silence that teaches. That's what you've done. Your silence has become their greatest teacher. Every day it reminds them of who they were with you. Every day, it exposes what they lost. And the more they try to forget you, the more they feel you. Because forgetting isn't just about letting go of a person. It's about letting go of a version of life that felt meaningful. And they can't do it. They can't delete what felt real, so they live in cycles, days of pretending, nights of remembering, moments of denial, waves of regret. And all the while you continue forward, you grow, you heal, you become. And that growth makes your memory even heavier. Because now, not only are they haunted by what was, they're haunted by what could have been. By the thought of you smiling in someone else's arms. By the reality that they're no longer part of your future. That's what breaks them, not the silence. But what it symbolizes: finality, closure, the door not just closed but locked, and that's when the panic sets in, because they know now that they waited too long, that the pride they clung to became the very thing that cost them you, that while they played games, you were making peace, that while they pretended not to care, you were learning not to need them, that while they were avoiding the truth, you were living it. And the truth is this: you loved them, fully, fiercely, freely, and they couldn't receive it. Not because you weren't enough, but because they weren't ready. And now in your silence they are learning, slowly, painfully, quietly, but learning. Because silence doesn't lie, it reflects. And your reflection? It's everywhere. If you've ever felt this, if you're watching this and nodding because you know what it means to be unforgettable, to walk away in power, to leave behind not pain but a lesson, then this moment is for you. Like this video and comment number 1 if that truth resonates. And if you want more insights like this on Stoic relationships, emotional healing, and the power of silence, subscribe to the channel. You are not alone, and your strength is not invisible. It's echoing in places you can't see, and they feel it every single day. In the end, silence speaks with a voice louder than anger, more powerful than revenge, and more honest than any apology could ever be. It's not meant to hurt. It's meant to heal, not to manipulate, but to liberate. When you choose silence, you choose yourself. You step out of the emotional tug-of-war. You stop handing over your peace in exchange for temporary validation. And in that moment, you don't just walk away from them. You walk back to you, the real you, the one who no longer begs to be seen, who no longer explains to be understood, who no longer stays in places that dishonor your worth. They didn't expect your silence to last because they never expected your healing to begin. But healing began the moment you stopped making excuses for their behavior, the moment you realized you were worthy of consistency, of presence, of peace. And now, they're left with a silence they can't break, not because they can't reach out, but because they can no longer reach you. That's the consequence they never calculated. That's the power they never considered you'd reclaim. And as you move forward, calmer, clearer, more in tune with your own value, remember this. It was never about making them understand. It was about understanding yourself. And in Stoicism, we don't seek vengeance. We seek virtue. We rise not in opposition to others, but in alignment with who we are becoming. You've chosen the high path, the quiet path, the path that heals instead of harms. And while they sit with their ego, starved and confused, you sit with your soul, fed and finally free. Because in the end, it's not the loudest goodbye that leaves the deepest mark. It's the one that walks away without looking back. And that silence, that's the lesson they never saw coming.